and welcome to another episode of Formula Relapse. Today I will be your host, and we are going to be talking about the Miami GP, specifically talking about what quali predictions I have in mind for this weekend. So we just saw free practice 1, we just saw free practice 2, and so we kind of have a good idea of kind of where some of the teams are going to be sitting. And how comfortable some of those drivers are looking. The focus of the weekend, of course, has been that fake water that they've been doing so many close-up shots of, and all the reporters have been just making fun of that water that just kind of sits, the little tarp that they put with the boats. It's really tacky. I think they should have just done something else, maybe like an artificial beach or something would have been a little better, but it is what it is. It's looking pretty hot in Miami. The good thing is that it's possibly going to rain tomorrow during qualifying, and so obviously if it starts to rain, that's going to bring out some kind of wild card picks and throw a wrench into my whole predictions. But I'm going in with the predictions that it's going to be dry because I know that typically if it rains in Florida, it's not for too long, so I'm not too confident that it's going to completely shower tomorrow, but we'll have to see. The track kind of reminds me of Australia and Baku combined. So Australia, because it has those really long straights with fast corners, and Baku because specifically at the castle section, when you're kind of cutting through that like 4-piece chicane, a lot of that track, especially where Lewis actually today was extremely slow, that kind of looks very similar to Baku. And so this track looks pretty cool. I know a lot of people weren't too excited about it, but I think it'll bring in for an interesting race because I think a lot of drivers are going to be cracking under the pressure because of how difficult it is. So I don't know if we'll be seeing too much overtaking, but I'm pretty confident that we'll be seeing a lot of racers kind of spinning out, crashing, barrier walls, and maybe on the straights too. We saw Sergio Perez when he was passing, I think it was one of the Aston Martins on the straight. He ended up missing his braking zone, running straight into kind of like that runoff area. And so something like that can absolutely ruin your race. So it should be for a pretty good race. Back to quali. Mercedes were looking pretty strong. And so these are going to be my predictions, right, for top teams. For Mercedes, they're looking quite strong. Russell's is looking extremely comfortable, sitting either 1 or 2 on the sessions of FP1 or 2, which I think Mercedes, we haven't seen that in a while from them. So I think that's going to be a really, really positive thing for the team. Hamilton is looking really strong as well. I heard the commentators talking about how with the porpoising not really being too much of an issue here because there's so many straights, the downforce isn't really necessary. And so the porpoising issue is kind of reduced for them. But Hamilton is still struggling a little bit compared to Russell. Red Bull's having some reliability issues. I think even with this, though, Perez, if he can finish the race, I think he has a pretty good chance of finishing on the top of the timing sheets for qualification. And if he's able to kind of pull that through, he maybe even has a good chance of getting a podium once the race is over. Verstappen, I think he's been on the back foot. This is a track he's not familiar with. And unfortunately, he hasn't been able to run much. I think he only got 14 laps or 20 laps in that first FP1 session. And in FP2, he had some reliability issues on the outlap, the very first one. And so his car started burning. I think because we're in such a hot track, I think we're going to be seeing kind of more reliability issues come out from some of the teams. And obviously that's a little bit more pronounced when it comes to Red Bull. Leclerc is looking extremely strong. I think he's a pretty good contender for pole up there with Russell maybe. He's looking extremely strong, but he's not the fastest by a mile. So typically we've seen that Ferrari has been obviously the fastest car here. I think here we're not really seeing that just yet. They're all within a tenth or 2/10 of each other. And so I think Leclerc has a pretty good chance as long as he can put together a pretty good lap. Sainz having another incident means he's going to be not very confident in his race weekend. I think this is just an awful way to kind of start it. And so if he does kind of set himself up for success tomorrow during qualification, has no incidents, doesn't, get blocked by someone, I think he's got a pretty good chance of actually doing something there. But the con to Sainz really performing like this and having all of these incidents is, one, the cost cap, right? All of these crashes cost the team something. But then two, now this is kind of gonna mess with his psyche, right? He's now going to assume that position of second driver, and so I think with Sainz, if he really can't put it together this weekend and has an awful weekend again, just like he has had the previous 3 weekends, I think we're gonna see a very different Sainz kind of come out, and hopefully he can kind of reset and get out of it. But typically drivers kind of stay in this rut until they have that summer break and kind of use that time to refresh. Alpine, specifically Alonso, is going to be there to pick up any scraps during qualifying. I think he's performing really well. He's showing that he still has all of his ability. And so the fact that he was up there in the top 5 in both FP2 or FP sessions, I think he's totally going to, if he can qualify really well, he's going to put himself in a position to essentially pick up the scraps if there's any issues with the top team. So Red Bull having reliability issues, maybe Sainz or Leclerc kind of spinning out. Mercedes maybe just not having a really fast race pace. Maybe they qualify well for this track, but they're not going to have a really fast race pace. So I see Alonso there 100% picking up anything that's going to be missed by the top teams. And I think easily he's going to qualify within the top 5. And if he is able to put him in a good race, have a good strategy, and have no incidents, I could see him possibly on the podium if there's incidents. Haas is going to need a really good result for the home GP. I hope it's going to be a top 10 during qualifying for Magnussen, and I hope that Mick Schumacher can qualify at least in the top of Q2. Mick really needs to kind of come out of his shell. He's no longer going against a really bad Russian driver. He's going against someone with extreme experience in various different series. He's been in Formula One for a while, and so Mick really needs to at least get close to this guy to prove that he's worthy of retaining that seat at Haas, because at this point that Haas is performing really well as long as there's someone capable in that seat. And so Mick really needs to kind of come out and put together a really good qualifying session, and that will lead to a really good race session, because I have noticed that his racing craft is pretty awesome, but I think qualifying is kind of where he needs to be a little stronger in. McLaren may double up with the top 10 in qualifying. I saw Daniel Ricciardo up there in the first session, and then Lando obviously was up there in the second session. As long as they're able to put in some good laps and not really have too much issues to the traffic, I think they're definitely both going to be clear of Q3. I think one of them might stay in Q2 if there's any incidents, but I think definitely we're going to see, and my bets are probably on Lando Norris getting up there into maybe like a P7, and with Ricardo maybe like an 11 or a 10 even. AlphaTauri is going to be one of those teams that is going to be in a very similar position to McLaren, in the sense that one of them is going to be in Q2 and one of them is going to be in Q3. And I think this because, Yuki Tsunoda, obviously second year, he's still kind of having to prove himself a little bit, but he's still a really fast person. And I think the fact that he's up there in P13 for FP2, I think that really shows that he's really getting a lot more comfortable. He was in, I think he was in P18 maybe the session before, so there's some improvement there. But he's still 1.3 seconds off the pace from pole sitter for FP1 or FP2. So I think Pierre Gasly is definitely going to score some points. I think if we can get Yuki to get in there and sneak in a Q3, I think he's a pretty good contender for some points as well this weekend. I'm not sure what was going on with Albon in FP1, but he was extremely fast. He was top 5 of the timesheets, and so that kind of completely went away during FP2 because he dropped down quite to the Williams kind of level. And so he's at the back foot with Nicholas Latifi. Nicholas Latifi, it's getting really hard to justify his position because the fact that, Albon was able to get so high up in that FP1 shows that he's kind of already reaching the max of what that car can do. And Latifi was nowhere near that. And so I think Latifi, it's getting really hard to justify his seat there. And Aston Martin, they're looking extremely weak. Sebastian Vettel kind of spinning out. It seems like that car is very difficult to drive, and so I don't think they're in for a good weekend, and I don't see either Vettel or Lance Stroll getting out of Q1. And so honestly, I definitely don't see them scoring any points. Now, I would like to be proven wrong with that, and I would love to see them do that, but honestly, with the way the car is handling, with the way the drivers are, confidence is kind of dealing with it, I don't think I see them anywhere near topping timesheets or even scoring points. And those are my race and quality predictions for the race.